Let's take a look at this now. Today marks International Women's Day, which is being commemorated under the theme Embrace Equity. And in his weekly newsletter, President Cyril Ramaphosa says economic empowerment of women remains vital, adding that empowering women is also key to fighting the scourge of gender-based violence. We're now joined by Professor Amanda Gouws from Stellenbosch University. Prof, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So when you hear the words embrace equity, which is the theme for this year, what do they mean to you at least?
Well, it means that, we should take the notion of gender equality seriously, and specifically in the workplace, because equity refers to mainly labor relations. But it's actually an empty slogan because, what does it really mean in a country where you have such high levels of joblessness, you have so many people on social grants, and you have so many people suffering from social exclusion. So if you say you want to empower women, then surely the government must have some type of plan in terms of what they want to do to empower women.
Let's expand on that, because you label it as an empty slogan. To your point on a number of people depending on social grants, the Social Security Agency of South Africa mentioning that many of the people, or a majority of the people who are on those social grants, are women, suggesting that they do not have agency about their finances. And we can get into a number of scenarios in terms of how people then get into situations that are less ideal because you are depending on somebody financially. But when you take a look at the labor laws as you describe it in the country, what then needs to be done to achieve this equity? We're still talking about this in 2023?
Yes, and I think, what you're mentioning is that economic dependence also means a lack of agency. And very often women are trapped in very violent domestic situations, and we are not managing to bring down the levels of violence and intimate femicide in South Africa. And I think here I want to say, if we look at the Ministry for Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, we have now replaced Minister Maiti Mashabane with Minister Dlamini Zuma. And it's been a ministry that has been seen as one that's not important, that doesn't have a lot of power and a lot of resources. So as long as you see the Ministry for Women as sort of a second-class type of ministry, we are not going to make progress with regards to how women are treated. And I really think, the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence need to be rolled out in a way that makes the interventions by government more visible. So to come back to the notion of empowerment, we can only empower people when there are systematic interventions into structural discrimination. And what we have in South Africa is the position of women and children are such that it's a structural problem. It's not an individual problem of women not being able to do what they need to do. This is structural, and it's structural in terms of the economy, but it's also structural in terms of institutions.
When you say in terms of institutions, how do you mean, Prof?
Well, we still need a quota for women in Parliament to get women into positions of power. If we look at the CEOs in this country, only 7% of the CEOs are women. If we look at top management, it's also a very small statistic. So clearly, women cannot, there's a glass ceiling for women in many professions. And as long as that glass ceiling exists, and very often that glass ceiling comes about because of women having children. So there's all kinds of discrimination for women in their childbearing years, which means that they cannot progress as well as they should. And, that's got to do with a lack maybe of paternity leave, a lack of childcare facilities, a lack of flexi time, and all kinds of types of interventions that can change this. But we are a very deeply patriarchal society that very often, women still have to deal with these issues that men very rarely have to deal with.
Prof, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, right? So if you're speaking to people and some men will tell you, but you have everything. What more do you want? You've got take a girl to work, child day, it's women's rights this, it's women's rights that. So you find that there are some male persons who are frustrated by what they perceive to be the world opening up so much for women, and they are sort of left on the sidelines, or they don't know what to do with themselves, or they don't know what their role is in society. At least I've heard some of those conversations. And so when it comes to women progressing, whether it be structurally, whether it be economically, whether it be us as a country, and we're not the exception to the rule, how then do we put men also on the table, so we're not having this dialogue amongst ourselves only as women?
Yes, I very often hear men talking on call-in programs and then saying, the reason why women now have everything is because they have too many rights. So it's that perception that if somebody gets something, somebody else loses. And this is not the case. We have seen that, for example, women make progress, but men always have the position of what we call the patriarchal dividend. So the privilege that comes with being a man. And I can explain it in this way. It's the same as white privilege. So the privilege that you get for being white, whether you've done anything to deserve it or not. And I am not denying that men also struggle in this society. Joblessness, affects everyone. And male-on-male violence is also a serious problem. But the point is, men are not being killed by their intimate partners. They are being killed in gun violence and gang violence and all kinds of other types of violence. So you can't blame women for, that type of violence, and you cannot blame women for progress that they are making. And it's just too easy to put the blame on women for progress that's well deserved in society.
I guess, Prof, I'm trying to just find ways of us to shift the needle. While a lot of work is being done, there are some people who are being left behind, right? And that then impacts generations. And we talk about gender-based violence and trying to find the solutions. Could we have more conversations with men and trying to find each other, at least hear each other?
Yes, well, I think that's very important. But if we talk about violence, for example, then why is it seen as a woman's problem, right? If the perpetrators of violence are men. So of course, we're only going to solve this problem if men become part of the solution. And therefore, we need to have these discussions. But men also need to talk to other men. If you are a man who is not involved in violence, or you're not a perpetrator, then, standing back and say, I'm not guilty is not helping. It's to actually call out other men. It starts with some type of joke about women, disrespect in the way we talk about women, and so on. And if you, as a man, remain silent about that, you are not part of the solution. So, Sonke Gender Justice, which is a non-governmental organization, has a program called One Man Can. And that's about, one man talking to another man can make a difference. So clearly there are initiatives. But sort of laying the problem at the woman's door and say, now, this is really also your problem. We are on the receiving end of the violence. And also, if we take that, the norm in South Africa is women-headed single-parent households. So women having to raise children on their own. So, we also need men to be role models for children. And very often they are absent.
Fair enough. So that's where you and I are concerned. The structural problems that, or the stubborn structural institutions that remain and that make it so difficult then for women to cross these many hurdles that have been put before them. Chief amongst which, the economic one that you pointed out. Where do you even begin to dismantle that in a country like South Africa, some almost 30 years down the line?
Well, I think it's very difficult because the whole problem of unemployment is really now so entrenched. And I really think we have to go back to communities, to what happens in communities and how we build the fiber of communities and how we, children become part of communities and they're raised in communities. That's an African, Ubuntu is an African proverb in sense, no, not only a proverb, but an ideology in the sense that people are only people through other people. And I think that's, that has been very damaged in this process in South Africa. So communities need to be rebuilt, and it's very difficult to build communities when people live in dire poverty, without the most basic necessities and services. So, it's also about government fixing local government service delivery. And, that really is something that government needs to do.
Prof.
Citizens can't do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your time this afternoon.